Welcome to this free CCNA Packet Tracer Practice Lab. You can download the lab file from the link in the description. If you like these labs, please consider supporting me via my Patreon or the cryptocurrency options in the description. Also, please subscribe to the channel for more labs like this. In this lab, we will take a look at single area OSPF. We will configure it on these 4 routers to achieve full connectivity. OSPF also supports a hierarchical multi-area design, but that will be for the next lab. This time, we will do a simple OSPF configuration and then do some tweaking to affect the path traffic takes. The first step is to configure a loopback address on each router. Note that this isn't a necessary step for OSPF. However, we will do this first so that the loopback address becomes the OSPF router ID each router uses to identify itself to neighbors. Having router IDs of 1.1.1.1, 2.2.2.2, and so on will simplify things. As for how the router ID is determined, manual configuration takes precedence. However, if it's not manually configured, the highest loopback address becomes the router ID. If there is no loopback interface address, the highest address of another interface becomes the router ID. We should create these loopbacks before we configure OSPF, because if we do it after, the routers won't update their router IDs unless we reset the OSPF process. That's no problem in a lab like this, but in a real network, you can't just reset your routing protocols at any time. Anyway, let's make those loopback interfaces. On R1, enable conft interface L0 for loopback 0. IP address 1.1.1.1 255.255.255.255 exit. We don't have to use the no shutdown command on a loopback interface. Next, R2. Enable conft interface L0 IP address 2.2.2.2 255.255.255.255 exit. Next, R3. Enable conft interface L0 IP address 3.3.3.3 255.255.255.255 exit. Finally, R4. Enable conft interface L0 IP address 4.4.4.4 255.255.255.255 exit. Okay, that's it for our loopback addresses. Next, let's configure OSPF on each router and advertise the routes. Let's go back to R1. Router OSPF, then we have to enter a process ID. In almost all circumstances, you will only use a single OSPF process on a router. However, you can create multiple processes, and each will keep a separate database. Also, the process ID is locally significant. It can be different on each router, and they can still become neighbors. Just to prove that, I'll use a different process ID on each router. Let's go with 1 for R1. Now let's advertise our networks. Let me explain a little how OSPF's network command works. It looks for interfaces within the range stated in the network command, and then advertises the network prefix on those interfaces. It doesn't necessarily advertise the exact network used in the network command. For example, network 12.0.0.0. Then I put in a wildcard mask, which if you remember is inverse of a regular mask. The 12.0.0.0 network is configured as a /24. But if I, for example, configure a /8 with 0.255.255.255, it will still advertise the /24 network on F10, not a /8. Okay, next, enter area, followed by the area number. This is single area OSPF, so let's just put 0 on all of these. Next one, the G00 interface. Network 14.0.0.0. I'll set it as a /16 this time, just to show anything works as long as the interface prefix falls within that range. 0.0.255.255, area 0. Finally, the loopback address. Network 1.1.1.1, 0.0.0.0, area 0. This time I configured the exact /32 mask on the interface. I'll state it one more time, because it's very important to understand this. G00 and F10 will advertise the network prefix actually configured on the interface, not the /8 and /16 prefixes I configured here. Okay, now let's set up OSPF on the other routers, and I'll show you a useful shortcut. I'll go on R2. Router OSPF, and again I'll use a different process ID to show that it can still become neighbors with R1 and R3. So I'll use a process ID of 2. Now, as for that shortcut I mentioned, it's a way to activate OSPF on all interfaces with a single command. This is useful for labs, but perhaps you might not want to do it on a real network where you want to more precisely control which interfaces OSPF is activated on. Network 0.0.0.0 followed by a /0 mask, which is usually 0.0.0.0, but because we have to use a wildcard mask, it is inverse. It is 255.255.255.255, area 0. Okay, all networks fall within the 0.0.0.0/0 range, so OSPF will be activated on all interfaces. Let's do the same quickly on R3 and R4. R3 first. Router OSPF 3, network 0.0.0.0, 255.255.255.255, area 0. Then R4. Router OSPF 4, network 0.0.0.0, 255.255.255.255, area 0. Okay, now let's go back to R1 and see what's up. Do show IP OSPF neighbor. Now we can see that R1 has become neighbors with R2 and R4. Also, notice that the loopback interfaces we configured have indeed become the router IDs of R2 and R4. Also, the routers successfully became neighbors, even though we use different process IDs on each router, proving that the process ID is only locally significant. Next, let's check the routes we received here on R1. Do show IP route. Here are the loopbacks of R2, R3, and R4, and here are the 23.0.0.0 and 34.0.0.0 networks to which R1 isn't directly connected. Note that they have an O beside them, meaning that they were learned via OSPF. Also, notice that R1 learned the network prefixes configured on each of the interfaces, not the network prefix we actually configured on R2, R3, and R4. Actually, we configured 0.0.0.0/O on them, and there is no 0.0.0.0/O network in the table here, so that demonstrates the point as well. Now, the next step is to suppress OSPF messages on the loopback loopback interfaces of each router. Because OSPF is activated on the loopback interfaces, each router is sending OSPF advertisements on them. However, the loopback interface doesn't actually lead to anywhere beyond the router itself, so there's no point of advertising anything on them. To suppress the advertisements, we configure the loopbacks as passive interfaces with this command. Passive interface L0. That's all. Let's quickly do the same on the other routers. First R2, passive interface L0. Then R3, passive interface L0. Finally, R4, passive interface L0. The next step is to configure the OSPF reference bandwidth of each router so that a 10 gigabit Ethernet interface would have an OSPF cost of 1. What exactly does that mean? Well, from R1's perspective, it has 2 routes to reach R3. It can go via R2 or via R4. How does it decide which path to use? Let's go back to R1 and look at the routing table. Notice beside these OSPF routes there is a 110, which is the administrative distance for OSPF. I won't talk about administrative distance now, hopefully you've studied it. However, next to it is the metric. Notice that the metric via R2 and the metric via R4 are the same, so both are in the routing table. However, why are both the same when the path via R4 includes a faster gigabit Ethernet interface? Well, to calculate metric, OSPF divides a reference bandwidth by the bandwidth on the interface. The reference bandwidth by default is 100 megabits per second, and a fast Ethernet interface is 100 megabits per second. So a fast Ethernet interface has a metric of 1, which is 100 divided by 100. A gigabit Ethernet interface has a bandwidth of 1000 megabits per second. 100 divided by 1000 is 0.1. However, the lowest possible metric in OSPF is 1. So, gigabit and fast Ethernet interfaces have the same metric by default, 1. Even a 10 gigabit or 100 gigabit interface would have a metric of 1. To change this default behavior, we can change the reference bandwidth with this command. AutoCost, reference bandwidth, then the bandwidth in terms of megabits per second. Our instructions say to make it so that a 100 gigabit interface, a 10 gigabit interface would have a cost of 1. So we should set the reference equal to 10 gigabits per second. So I'll enter 10,000. As this message says here, make sure the reference is consistent across all routers. Let's go on R2. AutoCost, reference bandwidth 10,000. Okay, next R3. AutoCost, reference bandwidth 10,000. Finally, R4. AutoCost, reference bandwidth 10,000. Okay, let's check again on R1. Do show IP route. Now we only have one route to 3.3.3.3 via the gig00 interface, because OSPF now distinguishes between the cost of a gig Ethernet and the cost of a fast Ethernet interface. Now, our last step isn't something you'd likely do in a real network, but I want to show you that you can do it. After adjusting the reference bandwidth so that R1 will take the path via R4 to R3's loopback exclusively, we are now going to configure the opposite and make it use the path to R2 exclusively. We will do this by configuring the OSPF cost of some interfaces. Now, there are multiple ways to do this. We can do it by lowering the cost of some interfaces, or by raising the cost of others, or a combination. Just to make this quick for the video, I'll raise the cost of the G00 link between R1 and R4 to 10,000. I'll start on R1. Interface G00. To change the cost, use this command. IP OSPF cost 10,000. Okay, now let's do the same on R4's end. Interface G00. IP OSPF cost 10,000. Now let's go back on R1. Do show IP route. Okay, now the route to 3.3.3.3 has changed back to R2 exclusively, because we manually adjusted the cost of its gig00 interface, despite the fact that the path via R4 is actually faster. We covered a lot of different things in this lab. OSPF is very important both for the exam and because it's widely used in real networks. Make sure you know the commands required. I will also be making a few more OSPF labs, so be sure to practice further with those. That's all for this lab. Thank you for watching. I hope this lab and video have been helpful for you. Please subscribe for future labs like this, which will be released weekly. If you have requests for any specific labs, let me know in the comment section. If you want to support my channel, I accept Bitcoin and Ethereum donations via the addresses in the description. I am also a Brave verified publisher and accept BAT, or Basic Attention Token, donations in the Brave browser.